Hey everyone, welcome to another Prehab Moto. Today we're going to talk about the ankle and the anatomy around the ankle. So, got my handy dandy drawing here, no artist, but it definitely works for us here. So what we're looking at here is all the bones in the foot along with the two or lower leg bones being the fibula and tibia. In the foot itself, we have 26 bones, and so the whole body has 206 bones, therefore each feet accounts for about 1/8 or a quarter of our total bones when added together. So pretty impressive, a lot of the bones in there. Looking at this, we have a very big bone that sits at the bottom of our tib and fib, which is called our talus. And that bone is a common bone that can get broken under large forces into the ankle joint. We have our calcaneus, which is actually our heel. So the bony bottom part of our foot that we can stomp into the ground, that's actually the calcaneus. We go into these cuboid bones, which are, as called, cuboids. They're kind of square and create these cubes. They have low blood flow to them, so whenever somebody injures them, it could be from a twist, it could be from being smashed, but those cuboids don't have a lot of blood flow, so they're pretty hard to heal. We have the cuboid, the navicular, medial, lateral, and intermediate cuneiform. So those sit in the midfoot. We can actually, if we touch our feet, we can feel those bony parts. Very similar to the hands, which these are also cuboids, but that's going to be for another video. Then we get into the metatarsals. Each toe or midfoot has the metatarsals. We can definitely feel those if we rub over our midfoot. And then we get into the phalanges, which make up the rest of the bones. That's where actually a lot of the bones in the feet come from. Because if we look up here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bones just at the top with the talus, navicular, calcaneus, and everything like that. So a lot of it actually comes down from these phalanges, which are little bones. And then there's also the sesamoid bones, which sit on the bottom of the foot. Those bones are kind of like kind of work similar to how the kneecap works. They're this little anchor point for the muscles on the bottom of the feet in the arch and everything like that, especially in that plantar fascia. Getting into the bigger muscles, the posterior or back side of the foot, back side of the lower leg, which controls the articulation of the ankle and the foot, in dorsiflexion, which is when we pull the toes up towards the shin, and also plantar flexion, which is when we point the toes away. That's how the ankle really is going to work as a suspension for any sport and every sport, but definitely in motocross, we have the suspension on our bike, but we also have suspension in our ankles that play a big part. So if our ankles are really stiff, we're taking out a form of suspension. And that goes for runners too. If you remove the ability to absorb impact through the ankle and also through the arch of the foot, it's actually a huge disadvantage. It's something that us as human beings have used to our advantage for a very long time. So in the back here, very common calf muscles called the gastrocnemius, the gastroc, which makes up kind of the big bulk or that ball-looking muscle on the back of the leg. That muscle aids in plantar flexion or pointing the toe, or if we're walking or jumping, pushing off and elevating us up. Underneath it is actually another muscle called the soleus, which a lot of people don't really know that there's actually two muscles back there that work together, the soleus and the gastroc. The gastroc runs into the Achilles tendon, which is going to run down into that calcaneus. So big tendon here, bally muscle connecting to the tendon, tendon being a attachment from muscle to bone, a ligament being bone to bone. So that Achilles tendon there. The soleus actually runs all the way down and attaches from the upper lower leg into the heel itself. So a lot of times when we feel like we're tight in our Achilles, that's non-pliable material, therefore it could be our gastroc that's actually tight, or even the soleus, which lies underneath it. We also have the tibialis posterior, which is a antagonist action with the tibialis anterior, which is actually the dorsiflexor. So those muscles run on the front. One runs down the back, one runs in the front. But those tibialis muscles aid in dorsiflexion and also plantar flexion, depending on which side we're talking about. We do have the hallucis longus and brevis. Those muscles also aid in plantar flexion. But the tibialis anterior on the front side of the shin is kind of the main muscle for dorsiflexion, which is very important. A lot of people lack dorsiflexion because of the strength of their shins. So if you've ever had shin splints, that's a lot due to weakness in that tibialis anterior, which is running down the shin bone or running down the tibia and can actually cause little micro tears to that muscle, which can be very sensitive and bruisey feeling, which is the end result being your shin splints. So pretty basic anatomy around this. It's not really complex because the articulation of the ankle, like I said, is plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. And then there's inversion and eversion and then circumduction, right? Because we can move the ankle in circular motions and we can also kind of move it left to right, just like we can with the wrist. The wrist and the ankle are very similar to each other, two long bones going into cuboid bones, into carpals or tarsals in this instance in the foot, carpals being the hand, tarsals being the feet. So very similar setup. The biggest difference that we lack in the feet is the ability of being more dexterous with our toes, because our toes are a little bit shorter than our fingers, but we also lock our feet up in shoes a lot. So I'm going to go over some exercises that can actually help the feet become stronger because we let them out of the shoes and strengthen up the muscles, because there's 30 joints down in here and there's over 100 different little mixtures of levers and stuff going on in here, and when we compact that into a shoe, it doesn't really let them function the way that they're supposed to function. And when we're talking about strength of the ankle, we really should be strengthening the foot, because the foot is the foundation of everything that I am currently standing upon, and especially in sport, is the one thing that is actually in contact with the ground. So when we're locking those up in shoes, those muscles will atrophy, they'll become very stiff in those 30 joints, and those 26 bones will not articulate the way that they're actually intended to articulate. So the best thing that I could say is imagine putting your hand in a mitten and not moving it for years and years and years really, but then one day somebody asks you to point your finger separately away from the other ones and see how well that would work. It wouldn't really go very well, it would feel very stiff, maybe even crampy. So the bottom of the foot being the arch or the plantar fascia is something that people deal a lot of discomfort with. It can get tight. It's getting tight because you're not using it. So best thing to do is get the shoes off. Even performing exercise barefoot will help strengthen the foot, which then in returns helps strengthen all those muscles up into the lower leg as well, because it's a chain reaction, everything works together. So like I said, it's not a huge complex as far as the anatomy goes, but there's a lot going on that it's more of a neglect problem. And when we get into the sport of motocross, our connection with the bike is our feet to our knees touching the seat and then our hands on the bars. So when 1/3 of our connection to the bike is actually weak, we really think a lot about our arms and strengthening our arms and how it holding on and then squeezing with the knees. And yes, we should ride on the balls of our toes, but what if your feet are actually not strong enough to stay on the balls of your toes long enough, and then you start riding midfoot? That's going to start to affect certain form work that could be helping you and maybe relaxing your arms a little bit. So little food for thought on that, of course. We're going to break down 5 different exercises and some stretches that are going to help the ankles, the shins, and also the feet be better, and then we'll go from there. Thanks, guys.